everybody. Welcome back to a brand new episode. Today, we are joined by Amanda Wagner. Amanda is passionate about evidence-based nutrition and fitness. She is a former high school science teacher with a master's in education and science ed who changed careers to become a registered dietitian nutritionist. She did this in December 2022. She's also an avid runner and former D1 cross country and track athlete who is enthusiastic about and fueled by a vegan diet. Amanda became a UESCA Certified Running Coach in December 2023, and she is on a mission to show others that you can be successful in athletics and life fueled by plants.
As an RDN and certified running coach, Amanda finds it rewarding to share her love of nutrition, fitness, and plant-based eating with others and help them reach their own wellness goals. She also likes to work with those who have been diagnosed or suspected ARFID, also known as Avoidant Restrictive Food Intake Disorder, due to her own lived experience and because there are not many dietitians out there that really work with ARFID. She draws on both her lived experience and professional expertise as a dietitian when helping those with ARFID. We're so excited for today's episode. We've never talked about this before, so it'll be great to share with you and get all of her insight. And enjoy.
Amanda, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
We are so excited to have you. We are talking about ARFID today, which will allow you to explain, of course. But before we do that, will you walk our listeners through a day in the life, what you do for work, education, hobbies, all that good stuff?
Yeah. So I am primarily a private practice dietitian, but I am also a running coach. So every day during the week, that's what I'm doing. I'm working face-to-face with clients. I'm doing marketing. I'm filing insurance claims. I'm writing running plans for my athletes. I am my own boss, essentially. It keeps me very, very busy. But outside of that, I also read a lot. I've read, I think, 130 books or something like that this year.
Dang.
Yeah, my Goodreads is not correct for the people that follow me. Master list. I like to crochet, and then I run a lot. I used to be a Division I athlete, and even though I'm kind of old now, I'm still really passionate about running. And that's really what I do in my spare time: reading, running, hanging out with my cat and my husband. I'm kind of a homebody.
A good variety of activities. And also, we love a good reader here because, as you know, Hannah and I also read. So
that could be a potential, actually different bonus question, is something book related. We might change that.
That we might have to change that.
Stay tuned.
Cool. Well, and I feel like I know you. For anyone that has seen our social medias, Amanda and I have hung out a few times. Let's get right into it. What is ARFID? I feel like it doesn't get talked about as much really as it should be. So Amanda, walk us through what exactly is ARFID?
I always like to start by what ARFID is not, and that is picky eating. It is so much more complicated than picky eating. ARFID stands for Avoidant Restrictive Food Intake Disorder, and it is, you hear with people who were called picky eaters, or maybe they have a child that's a quote unquote picky eater. They will say, oh, if you give them food, they'll just eat it. That's not how ARFID is. ARFID is an extreme fear of eating, and it can stem from a variety of reasons. It could be the sensory aspect of eating, texture, temperature, taste. A lot of people with ARFID are actually what is called super tasters. So they taste things more intensely and are more impacted by the flavors. It can be aversive in nature, a fear of having an allergic reaction, of throwing up or choking. It can also be someone that's just really not interested in eating. And that can be challenging for people to understand because you have to eat to live, right? But for people with ARFID, eating is a really big challenge, and it's not being talked about a lot because there's a lot of misconceptions on what it is, or do I have ARFID? Do I have something more significant than ARFID? But it can lead to growth issues. It can really impact your life as an adult. it is seen across all age groups. And I'm just really passionate about it in raising that awareness.
That's such a huge discrepancy. Yeah. I think the fact that it's not just in kids and it's not just picky eating, like those are what you think of often when you just think of it at a surface level. I'm curious too, in your experience, do you feel like it gets misdiagnosed a lot as well? Like it usually is diagnosed as like anorexia when it's actually ARFID. Does that happen a lot too in your experience?
Yes. If someone, so ARFID affects people of all body types, but if someone has had a pretty significant weight loss, that is when I see clinically that people are often diagnosed with anorexia instead. And that can be devastating because the treatment for anorexia is not necessarily the appropriate treatment for someone with ARFID.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like in my experience too, that's what I see a lot is anorexia tends to be the one that they sort of get confused as. I don't know, we're kind of going off script here, but have you ever noticed any of the other eating disorders being tied to it? Or is it usually going to be anorexia, do you think?
Anorexia is tied the most with it, but I have seen some overlap with binge eating disorder and ARFID, and that I'm not entirely certain, and I don't know if I want to theorize, but it might just be because of having a small amount of safe foods that can sometimes be the tie, or maybe if someone had binge eating earlier in life. A lot of people are born having ARFID, but there is a subset of people that develop ARFID after a traumatic experience or an illness. And so that can that is where we can see the overlap too. But I see anorexia and ARFID together the most often.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what I kind of would see the most too.
Definitely. What types of healthcare professionals, if like maybe you're curious that you might have ARFID or someone you know, or like your child, friend, loved one, who would you direct them to seek out if they are potentially like, is this something that if like people are hearing this and they're like, oh, this maybe sounds like something someone has or I have, where should they seek help?
Yeah. Usually ARFID requires like a multidisciplinary team. And if you're someone that's curious if that's you, the first place to start, I often recommend people to talk to a therapist or a psychologist. They're the ones that can give that ARFID diagnosis. And then from there, a dietitian can be a key player in the treatment, having a primary care provider in which to monitor labs, growth if you're someone that's still growing. A speech language pathologist or occupational therapist is sometimes a team member as well, but I always tell people to start with a therapist or psychologist if that's accessible to them.
Yeah. I love that you mentioned the SLP and or occupational therapist. That I think is underutilized. I have a patient that I see that has ARFID. She's an adult and hers is very like textural. She has a lot of safe foods that she turns to that are just safe because of the texture they have. And when she's feeling really stressed, she only wants those safe foods. And so she finally got a referral to go see an occupational therapist. Unfortunately, we don't have the best eating disorder resources in my area. And so they weren't quite sure what to do with her, which was a real bummer for both of us. I was like, oh, we finally got a diagnosis for her. And then, or not diagnosis, a referral. And then they kind of just like said, we don't really know how to help you. But I feel like if you have access to a good occupational therapist, someone who has a background in this, I think that's really worth looking into to understand like where these aversions and preferences come from and how to challenge these food fears in a way that is safe. But I also think it just speaks, like in this experience that I had with my patient, to just how unknown and I don't know, there's not enough training, I guess is what I'm trying to say, in the whole world of eating disorders, especially when it comes to ARFID. There's just not enough people talking about it, training in it, and treating it either, I don't think.
Right. And the key thing when you bring up the occupational therapist, like with kids, they might have them like play with the food or smell it or something. And I've always wondered, why can't we have adults interact with food that way? Because that
Yeah.
could be really beneficial to them as well. Or working on strengthening muscles in your like your upper extremities that could help with swallowing if you're someone that is the way that you present with it. Like there has to be
Yeah.
creativity and out of the box thinking with ARFID, and I don't know if enough providers are doing that right now.
Yeah. I feel like as dietitians, not to toot our own horn, but I feel like we're really well trained in going outside of the box and like thinking on the fly and I don't know, just doing what our patient needs in that moment and sort of making a plan with them for the future too. I don't want to speak poorly of other professions, of course, but I just wonder if they don't quite get that training to be as like on the fly as we are. And they sort of have like more strict protocols and regimens they must follow. I wonder if that's a reason why, like in my case with this patient, they just kind of said, we don't have a protocol in place for someone like you, so we don't really know how to help.
Yeah,
It's
I
tricky.
hear that too. It is tricky.
Well, I want to kind of backtrack a little bit. We went over some of the misconceptions of ARFID about it not being just picky eating. It's in more than just kiddos. Are there any others that you see or hear that you want to kind of combat?
I don't know if this is exactly a misconception, but there is a growing body of professionals, and I'm going to include myself in this, that believe in time ARFID will be considered a neurodivergence as well as an
Hmm.
eating disorder, like having a different brain, a different way of thinking and interacting with food. There is a huge overlap in people with ARFID that are also neurodivergent. That isn't to say that 100% of people with ARFID are neurodivergent. Sometimes people develop ARFID with these traumatic experiences, or maybe they had celiac disease. That is a way I've seen ARFID as well, and that's what triggered it. But so it's just this misconception um, that it could for sure. I've heard people say this can for sure be cured, and I don't know if in every case it can be cured. I think people have to figure out what their values are and like what recovery looks like to them. Because if it is a neurodivergence, they might always have a tough time with certain textures or certain temperatures in that presentation. And I don't know if I'm rocking the boat here saying that, but that's something I've been talking to other professionals about, that there isn't as clear cut of a recovery, but rather to figure out how to live with it and to live according to your values, maybe going out to more restaurants, eating more variety, but maybe respecting that you don't eat certain foods, or maybe your food needs to be really warm or really cold, things like that, like accommodating it.
I feel like since like there is that lack of resource just everywhere for ARFID, it's really encouraging to hear that like healthcare professionals in the field are like actively like thinking of like what more this could be. It's like it's not just potentially this, maybe, we don't know, but I feel like that's a really interesting
Concept?
yeah, to
Yeah.
think about.
Yeah, I have heard some as well, just amongst others in this field about it being sort of crossed over with certain neurodivergencies. Is that the right word? And I think what you said too is what you said about it, like not always needing to be cured, is worth noting as well, because you're not going to cure autism or ADHD. And I think in the same way, we're not always going to be able to completely cure ARFID, especially if it is so closely tied to, like, let's say your autism. Like, if those two are so interconnected and your autism is what is really driving your ARFID in a lot of ways, you're not going to get rid of the autism. And so you likely aren't going to fully, again, cure. I don't know if that's even the right word, but cure that ARFID. And I've really been, I don't work a lot with ARFID patients. I work a lot more with binge eating disorder and even anorexia. But I've been really grappling with that idea with those patients as well. It's like recovery for everyone is going to look different. And it's not always going to be this full blown, again, I'll say the word cure, where it's like you totally get rid of your binge eating disorder. Like you might be 10 years recovered, but still have a binge once in a while if a trigger presents itself. And I'm sure that can apply to ARFID too in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, that's why when I start working with someone with ARFID, we kind of discuss like what's going on, like what are their goals and values. Because some people with ARFID may want to not do certain things or to do certain things more often. And some of them, their goal may be, I just would like to have a little bit more variety. Some of them, they want to completely and fundamentally eat differently. Like it's such a spectrum for what it looks like for them. And we have to keep in mind, like, are they medically safe and stable? And then just working with people, like we can't decide the goals for these people. That's something that I think can be really hard. We have to like ask them, what does it look like to you? And that's like in my intake, I ask that.
That's a very good question.
I love that.
I feel like that's something that should be asked probably more often.
We're
Instead
problem
of like,
solvers.
we're gonna cure you of everything and this is what we think it should look like, but asking them, putting it a little bit more in their hands, what does recovery look like for you? That's really good.
I love that. I say we finish up talking about treatment a little bit more. So we talked about it a little bit here and there, but in the role of a dietitian, like if you have a patient that's coming to you and they have ARFID, what are sort of like the first things you would do with them? And then sort of like, what does treatment look like going down that road?
Yeah, great question. People with ARFID can come from a variety of places. They may be stepping down from a higher level of care. They may be building their own customized treatment team. What I usually do to start is I do this really comprehensive history and I understand what they've been eating, what their goals are. And usually my first line is to increase the amount and or frequency they're eating. We usually don't change many foods. So a lot of people with ARFID have safe foods that tend to be, perhaps crunchy, not everyone, but crunchy and blander, say like a cracker. And so it might be, if you're having crackers once a day, can you have it twice a day or 3 times a day? If you're having 5 crackers, can you have 6 or 7? So we like really tier it up slowly and it's usually just increasing the amount. That is the first place to start. The second spot is I usually get through with them and make a list of like what they used to eat, what they're currently eating, what they would like to try. And we gather that information to figure out which direction to go next. Because everyone is so different. Some people might need to eat their safe food or foods over and over until they get their vitals up. And some people might be ready to start challenging themselves and working with a food they're more afraid of or they haven't eaten recently. So we really customize it in session. Increasing safe foods, exposures may happen if the client wants to do that early on. Some of my clients prep food in session. They have a bit of a fear of eating alone or preparing their own food. So we do it kind of together in session. Those are the main directions I go to start with. Trying to think if I'm missing anything. It's so customized with ARFID.
And that's kind of what I was getting at earlier about us being so good at going on the fly. Like you just take it case by case with what the patient or client needs, which I think is a nice skill that we have as dietitians, being able to do that instead of it being like, oh, you have ARFID, here's this exact protocol we must follow with you. It's kind of nice that we get to just treat them as a person and not just like an ARFID patient,
Right.
Yeah.
And I love that about our profession too, because so many people, whether with ARFID or other concerns, they might come to us as dietitians. They might talk to their doctor for 10 minutes and I've had patients, feel kind of dismissed, but we in this outpatient setting are meeting for anywhere from 45 to 90 minutes, depending on the session. We have way more time to really dive into things with the people we're working with. And I think that's really valuable. And one of the reasons I'm like, you should see a dietitian if you just want more time on the issues you face or the questions you have around nutrition.
Are there resources to find ARFID specific dietitians?
Yes. One dietitian that I am pretty close with, have worked with before, Lauren Sharifi, ARFID dietitian on Instagram. She has a spreadsheet that is available on her website that links all these dietitians that are versed in ARFID, what
Nice.
state they're in, if they take insurances, and that would be a great place.
Wow. Perfect.
Also, people can always reach out to me, no matter what state, and I can try to help them find a resource as well.
That's so helpful. Thank you. And
That's
we'll
awesome.
also include the link in the show notes and everywhere so they can access that too.
Well, speaking of that, Amanda, are there any other, I guess, like plugs you want to include? Like, let our people know where they
For
can find
you.
you if they do want to learn more. Yeah, for you, your own services.
Yeah. So, ARFID is one of my specialties, and the other is sports nutrition and plant-based eating. And I'm giving that disclaimer because on social media, my handle is fueling.veggie athletes. I do a bit of ARFID there and a lot of sports nutrition. Then my website is www.amandawagnernutrition.com. My email is amanda@amandawagnernutrition.com. And if someone is listening and there is sometimes an overlap, they're interested in run coaching, Coach Amanda@philaendurance.com is the way you can reach me for run coaching.
Well, this has been wonderful. Amanda, thank you so much for coming on. Before we let you go, do you have any last thoughts, like anything you missed, anything we missed that you just like to leave the listeners with related to ARFID?
What I hear all the time with ARFID is there's not enough people talking about it or people relating to it. So if you're someone listening and you have that lived experience with it, it could be really beneficial to talk about it, whether it's in your communities in real life or on social media. I didn't share this earlier, but I have lived experience with ARFID. So that was one of the reasons I became so passionate about it and wanting to work in it. And I think the more people of all walks of life, all ages, all professions talk about it, the less it will be unheard of. There will be less of, oh, it's like children only, or it looked like more out of the box discussions as to who can have ARFID. It doesn't discriminate, just like all other types of eating disorders.
Well, we will link everything in the show notes if you guys would like to see or hear more from Amanda. But thank you so much for coming on again. We will be having the bonus question exclusively offered at Spotify over there. So definitely you guys will have to go listen to what Amanda has to say as we're potentially changing our bonus question, probably to something book related. So that will be very fun. But thank you once again for coming on. This was so helpful and educational. We're excited to share this with everyone.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. This was really fun.
We'll see you guys next week. Otherwise, bye. Like what?
We're like 3 years into this and our outros are still our weak point. Okay, bye guys.